1, go. Careful. What are you doing? Are you okay?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Power Drifting, the Rally Game podcast. My name is Tom and I will be your virtual driver. I'm joined, as ever, by my virtual co-driver, Mike. Hello, Mike. Are you ready to tackle a real rallying powerhouse of a game this time?
Oh, as always, Tom. As always, a favourite of mine today.
Fantastic. Yes, we're not messing around this time. In this episode, we will be covering one of the true greats of the rally game world, a game series that's been conspicuous by its absence ever since it burst onto the scene back in 2002. Can you remember 2002, Mike?
Vaguely, Tom.
It burst onto the scene back in 2002 on the original Xbox with RalliSport Challenge, which spawned an impeccable sequel in the form of RalliSport Challenge 2. It's quite odd that RalliSport Challenge, as a franchise, was restricted to just the original Xbox, when other first-party franchises such as Project Gotham Racing and Forza Motorsport went on to enjoy success on subsequent Xbox consoles. Was Microsoft right to leave RalliSport Challenge in the garage? Let's find out. Okay, so RalliSport Challenge 2 then, as I say, a real titan of the rally game pantheon. That's the term we like to use on this podcast, is it not, Mike?
Yeah, pantheon. I think, godlike games.
Released in 2004, it is the sequel to RalliSport Challenge, which, as I said, was released in 2002 on the original Xbox. This game was developed by Digital Illusions, also known as DICE, developers of the Frostbite engine. And incidentally, Mike, something that I only recently realised is actually the developer that also created Michelin Rally Masters, which was our last episode bonus stage.
Yeah.
Michelin Rally Masters Race of Champions. This is interesting because having played RalliSport Challenge, both of them, 1 and 2, extensively in the last week or so, there's quite there's a lot of similarities, not obviously in the visuals, but in the handling of the cars in RalliSport Challenge and Rally Masters. But we're not here to talk about Rally Masters. If you want to listen to me waffle about Rally Masters, go back and listen to that bonus stage that we did before this one. RalliSport Challenge 2 was published by Microsoft under the XSN Sports label. And one of the main draws of this game, I think for a lot of people, was the emphasis of the online multiplayer, Xbox Live. Back in those days of the early 2000s, Microsoft was pushing Xbox Live really hard. A lot of the games, they told you on the front of the box whether they were online enabled. Before we jump into RalliSport Challenge 2, Mike, can we discuss a little bit about if you have any experience with Xbox Live? Were you a player of it? I know you were heavily into PC gaming back then.
Yeah, so didn't play online with the original Xbox at all. I was late to the party, 360. Didn't play Xbox Live until 360 came around. So a lot of people I know were massively into Halo. I think that was the big draw for most people at the time. I think it was weird. It's a weird sort of time because I don't really remember much about Xbox Live being talked about. I mean, very shortly after, only a few years after RalliSport Challenge 2 and the late Xbox games, everyone knew what Xbox Live was. I always feel a little bit like that generation of consoles, it wasn't really, accepted. Maybe it was due to the connections in this country. I know that we've got a typically awful connection in most homes until quite recently. So I didn't really know much about it, Marshall. I think even with Halo, I think most people played it 4-player split screen. Sort of slightly odd, it's an odd time. I think it ties in a little bit with the Dreamcast and the PS2. They both had online capabilities, but weren't mainstream. They were very much sort of, you had to know what you were doing. You had to, the cost was obviously there as well. Yeah, it's very odd, but I think a lot of it went through to the 360. Obviously the arcade and stuff, and I think when that came around, everyone came on board. I think with the Xbox Live, it was never quite as big. And maybe your experience is different, but that was my experience.
No, very similar really. I think this period of gaming, sort of early 2000s, was very much a period of transition for online gaming on console. Anyway, obviously we had I think it was the Dreamcast that really kickstarted online console gaming. Xbox Live was really taking the baton from what Sega did with Dream Arena and Sega Net and Drycast, and kind of trying to make it more mainstream. And just like you, I didn't play Xbox Live online. back in the day. I mean, I never touched the online stuff. I just wasn't really interested in online gaming. But with RalliSport Challenge 2, as I've sort of read up retroactively, I see that was a massive part of this game. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, because this game, as with a lot of other Xbox games, can still be played online with a little bit of tinkering around with your internet setup. But let's get into RalliSport Challenge 2. Obviously, it's a rally game, as the name suggests, and the fact that you listen to a rally game podcast. Let's talk about gameplay modes. This game has a lot of content. It's phenomenal how much content it's got in terms of tracks, in terms of game modes. But we'll talk about the main gameplay modes at the moment. So you've got multiplayer, as we spoke about, obviously online and system link play. There's a 4-player split screen. Obviously, the Xbox is a 4-player as standard enabled system, so having a split screen multiplayer local option is a given, really. You've got single race modes, time attack modes, and a rather extensive career mode. Now, the career mode is split into 4 different tiers. You've got amateur, pro, champion, and super rally. Each one has its own license which you can earn. You can only earn the license by playing the different events that make up each tier. Amateur has got 21 events, Pro has got 36 events, Champion has 48 events, Super Rally has 16 events. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how much content there is in this game. Mike, I'm struggling to remember. Is it Dirt Rally? Sorry, is it Colin McRae Dirt that has the kind of Matrix single player mode where you can kind of go through and choose different events in any kind of particular order that you like and work your way up a sort of a triangle or a pyramid?
Yeah, it's a pyramid, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's a pyramid where you sort of have like 4 or 5 events on the bottom layer open at the beginning with. When you open a certain amount of points, it opens more of that layer, but then sort of slowly opens up a lot of tracks. You haven't got to race every single race to compete.
Yeah, so this, for me, it almost seems like the blueprint for that, because that is basically what you have here. It's not a pyramid, it's kind of on a more of a horizontal plane as opposed to a vertical going up a pyramid. But it's very similar. So you start off, you've got 1 event that you can race in, you complete that event, and then it opens up maybe 3, and then from there you've got another 3 and another 5 and another 6, and it just keeps getting bigger until you've got a whole host of different events that you can compete in any order that you choose, really. So if you'd like a particular type of event, you might stick to that. If there's one you're not particularly fond of, you don't have to do it. However, it helps you gain points, which eventually gives you a higher driver career points total in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so race types then. This is where the real meat of the career mode. You've got Rallycross, which is yourself racing against 3 other cars on a circular track. Almost not circular, but you do laps.
Smaller lap tracks on there. Basically.
Yeah. You've got crossover, which is like your standard sort of super special one-on-one, you versus another racer. Yeah. You've got your standard SS stages, which are split across 4 countries: Australia, Great Britain, Sweden, and Monte Carlo. There's 12 of those in total for each country. Interestingly enough, we will come on to this in a minute. No Finland, Mike. How does that?
Yeah, a bit of a shortcoming there, I think, in the game. I don't know if RalliSport Challenge 1 had Finland. I in the back of my head it did, but I can't remember. You've played it more recently than I have, so I'm not sure. But a bit of an odd absence. But I think maybe that ties in with the sort of style of game that they went for. Also, they're a Swedish developer, so there may be some kind of slightly local rivalry with Finland, maybe.
Yeah, we'll put Sweden in our game, but Finland, you can do one. We're not putting you in. We've also got hill climb, and I think, Mike, to be honest, my favourite type of racing in this game is the ice racing.
Yes.
I normally hate snowy, icy tracks in racing games, but here it's just so much fun too when you finally get the hang of the way the vehicle's controlled, the way you can just kind of go sideways.
Isn't it? It's basically drifting. I think it's they call it ice racing. I know, yes, it is on ice, but it is basically, as many games since have done, sort of done a drift heavy style. Just
on that point, I mean, the different gameplay modes you've got here, the different race styles, is really quite something for this period in time, because I think that the main competition on the Xbox specifically that this game had was Colin McRae Rally 3, and then a bit later on you had Colin McRae 2005 as well, which had nowhere near the amount of different types of event that this game has. It really did play its trump card really with all these different types, hill climbing, ice racing, that kind of thing. There's so much content. Fantastic, really.
Yeah.
Hard left. Long, easy right, tightens.
Okay, moving on to the different types of vehicles that you can control or look to control in this game. The vehicles it's quite strange. It's not like choose a car and just go onto a track, which you can do. But the game kind of splits the vehicles down into kind of subcategories which are suited to each different event. So you've got the rally cars, you've got the Group B cars, but then you've also got ones which are specifically designed for hill climbing, for ice racing, and for rally cross. All of the most famous cars are included. You've got things like the Subaru Imprezas, the Lancias, the Mitsubishi Lancers, and then you've got the Group B cars like the Audi Quattro. All the standard ones that you would like to see in a rally game, you've got them here. I was quite impressed with some of the more unusual vehicles that are included. One of which caught my eye was the Volvo 240 Turbo. I'm not sure if you know which one that is, Mike, but basically it's the one that looks like if you got a child and said to them, draw a picture of a car, and they draw a thing that looks like a top hat. Do you know what I mean? With the big boot sticking out the back and a big bonnet and then the big square top. It looks like that, basically. It's a marvelous design. I think the designer was probably trolling everybody when he brought that thing out. But it basically
it reminds me a little bit of it's not the same. Before anyone sort of writes in and complains, it's not the same. But it reminds me a little bit of when Homer Simpson had to make a car in The Simpsons, and sort of it didn't really understand the sort of aerodynamics and stuff. It's a very odd looking car. I mean, was that car actually? Was that an actual production car, or was it just a prototype car?
Oh, yeah, the Volvo 240, yeah. It was. I think the ones that we're more likely to see on the roads here, certainly in the UK, are the big old estate versions that look like a wardrobe on wheels. But the saloon version is, you do see it occasionally. But, it's a very distinct-looking vehicle, and I have to give props to DICE for including this. It's a Swedish manufacturer in a game developed by a Swedish company. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's obviously some kind of we'll get a Volvo in there somehow. There's a couple of Volvos in this game actually. Now I mention it, but yeah, that's a nice little touch. I thought was great. So yeah, a nice variety of vehicles ranging in power, in drivetrains, and in classifications as well. Got any favourites, Mike?
You ask this question every time, Tom, and the same answer every single time. The Impreza. I mean, It's the only car I drive in these games. I think the thing with this is that the cars look really good as well. I think the actual models are really, really good in this game. I think it's a real step. It's easy to look back now and sort of go, oh, it's a little bit janky here and not quite as good. But this game came out, 16 years ago. If you look back 16 years before that, we weren't even having sort of colour on games on the Spectrum. The amount of, if you look now, the game passes quite well now. I mean, I played it all week. I played it on an LCD TV, on a modern TV, and the cars do really look actually still pretty good. Quite remarkable.
I mean, we will touch on that in a little bit when we talk about the visuals. I mean, I was actually quite surprised at how well the game holds up visually. Just basically how well Xbox games in general hold up in this day and age on a proper old school CRT, which is what I've been playing on, and to get the full the full experience of the early 2000s. You did mention that you've been playing on an LCD. I tried playing it on my 4K TV, which I've got my PS4 and everything set up to, and it was just too blurry, so I had to get the CRT out and play it on that for the old more genuine feeling of the early 2000s.
I've played the game originally on pretty much same TV you have now, actually, because I had an old school Trinitron.
Yeah, Sony Trinitron, flat screen, yeah.
Yeah, I had a big flat screen one, really, really good at the time. I played it on a smaller LCD TV, running at 480i. It looked really blurry, really, really poor. I've got a modded Xbox, so I connected it up using 1080i, sort of whatever the Xbox does for the modded side of it. And it looks really, really good. It looks really, really clear. It looks really nice. And it's not high. It's not HD. Obviously, it's not an HD game, but it looks really, really good. And it's widescreen as default, I think, as well. Am I right in saying it's a widescreen as default? It looks really, really good. Some of the effects are really nice, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so let's move on to some of the locations and tracks. We've already touched on it slightly, that the famous Finland, favourite of both mine and Mike's. The country's not in this game, horrendous. But what you do get is you get Australia, Monte Carlo, USA, Great Britain, Argentina, Canada, and Sweden. Now, each of these locations has multiple tracks from different disciplines. So you've got the Argentina tracks are mainly the hill climb tracks. The Canadian tracks are mainly the sort of the rallycross and the crossover tracks. But you've got USA, Great Britain, Monte Carlo and Australia, which make up the main bulk of the rally mode. What I do like about these tracks, Mike, is even though they don't have any kind of official license whatsoever, there's no WRC branding or anything in this game. It's all made up stuff. But what I do like is the way the developers have been let loose, really, to make up these kind of idealized versions of what these countries should look like. In particular, what struck me was just how beautiful some of the courses are. One set in Great Britain in particular, you've got these rolling green hills, these little villages, the iconic red foam boxes, and for some reason Union Jacks fluttering on like the sides of buildings, which you don't really see that often, if I'm being honest.
No, but, I mean you do see them occasionally. Luckily, they are the right way up as well. I have a real issue with Union flags not being hung the right way up, but there they are. Castles, lots of castles in the game.
Yeah.
I do feel sometimes that people abroad think that we all live in castles, which we do, obviously. But
the reason my internet is so bad is that the phone point is at in the other wing. So I need to run a phone cable all the way through the grand hall into the into the west wing.
Actually, when I was playing it the other day, I was playing on one of the first stages you play for the British rallies, and it reminded me very much of the sort of some of the pre-release stuff from the new Pokemon game set in the UK, or a style of UK, because it was so. I mean, I don't want to come across like the game's like an arcade game where you sort of have, one of these old Outrun Europa games where you have sort of the Leaning Tower of Pisa next door to the Colosseum. It's not quite that bad, but it feels a little bit like that. It also feels a little bit like Forza Horizon 4. Yeah. In that sort of the British countryside, it's quite a realistic setting, with a few idealised sort of castles and bits, but it looks lovely. I mean, it's a real good recreation of Britain, as are most of the stages. Sweden with the normal snow-covered tracks, and the American one's really good as well, actually.
One that really stuck out for me was one of the longer Monte Carlo tracks where you can kind of see this city in the distance. Like the view draw distance in this game is phenomenal for an original Xbox game. You can see this cityscape in the background, like off on this like sort of peninsula, and then eventually, as you work your way down the mountain, you eventually end up driving to it. It's almost like remember in Ocarina of Time, you could see like the mountain in the distance, and you're like eventually you get to the mountain. It was almost like that, but in a rally game, I was like, wow, there's a city over there, and then eventually, 5 minutes later, you're actually in the city. I thought that was just brilliant. Yeah, so
I think it's real good touch. I think real good touch with Monte Carlo actually is a lot of the really good rally games will have Monte Carlo in it. I think if the developers are real big rally fans, they sort of will make sure that Monte Carlo's in there. It is, after all, the Monaco of the rally world. I know it is in Monaco, but I mean in terms of it's known as the most famous rally to many people. So I think it's when they put Monte Carlo in it, I think it's a sign of usually people who actually know what they're doing in terms of rally games.
Yeah. And just one final thought about these tracks is one of the nice things about a lot of them is that when you go through heavily wooded areas, you get a lot of like leaves all over the track, so the leaves kind of like blow up as the cars are flying over them, and I just thought it was a really nice touch.
Easy right, tight, into, easy left. Into, easy right, into, hairpin left. Easy left, long, medium right, tightness. Into, long.
Moving on, we touched on it earlier about Xbox Live. As I said, neither myself or Mike have played the Xbox Live experience. Xbox Live was actually shut down on the 15th of April 2010 for the original Xbox, so you can't play Xbox games officially on Xbox Live anymore. However, there is a little thing called X-Link Kai, which is a bit of software. You put it on your PC or your Mac. As long as your Xbox is connected to the same local area network LAN, you can actually still access the online portion of a lot of games. And there is quite a large community of people who still play original Xbox games such as Halo, Halo 2 online. And I believe RalliSport Challenge 2 is one of those games that is still online, basically. So it's something that I'm going to do in the future. I haven't done it yet, but I will endeavour to do so, just because I just want to see what the online community is like for this game. I know that all of the different racing types are available in Xbox Live, so playing against other people in the rallycross mode, it sounds like really great fun. And also the online leaderboards is something that's still going by all accounts. Yep. So yeah, that is definitely something that I will be checking out in the near future. Okay, Mike, gameplay and handling. That's where a lot of
Yes.
rally games are made or broken. Happily, RalliSport Challenge 2 has this down to a T. The controls are great. There's no other word for it. The analog triggers on the Xbox pad, along with the clever rumble effect, it just feels great. The cars feel like really powerful. The way the cars can propel themselves forward out of slides is just really refreshing for a game of this type and of this time. A lot of games have an overpowered sense of inertia, for me at least, where the cars, when you're kind of sliding, when it's applied mid-slide, the car just continues to travel in the direction of the slide. And even if you've got the finger fully on the accelerator, it doesn't really grip until it's slid as far as it wants to here. And it does take a little bit of getting used to. The cars do grip the road quite well and will sort of lurch forward as you sort of slam that accelerator on. It does take a little bit of time to get used to, as I say, but it's really satisfying. And when you get it down to a T, especially from the cockpit view, it just feels absolutely brilliant. I love it. The controls, for me, though, are a little bit on the twitchy side. The steering. Steering is twitchy but loose. Does that make sense? It sounds like the complete opposite.
Yeah.
But
No, I understand. Yeah, I think it's difficult to explain. I think, but it does feel like you're always on the verge of maybe losing control.
Yeah,
I feel.
Yeah, no,
not in terms of a very high, not in terms of a very high speed car hurtling down a track. Obviously, you're always on the verge of losing control. But I mean, in terms of you feel like one wrong move is going to spin you round. I don't know whether that actually is true though. I don't know whether the twitchiness actually is there or whether it's us thinking that because of the way the game, the weight of the game. So we've talked about weight in the cars in other games on podcasts before, but the cars here, they have a great weight to them, and the weight it seems perfect. And I always feel like you're almost expecting the same physics to be in other games to happen in this game.
Yeah,
I'm sure your experience will be different, but with me, I felt that there was a bit of twitchiness and there was also a little bit of looseness. So I understand that, but trying to quantify that and explain that to people might just make me sound like a babbling idiot. So
yeah,
I'm not sure.
It's good you say you always feel like you're on the very verge of like losing control, but there's always a way of clawing it back. So you might be drifting towards the edge of the track off the cliff, but then if you forget everything you know from other rally games and you think, right, I'm going towards the edge of this cliff, but rather than keep my finger on the on the handbrake or whatever, I'll try and brake. If I just slam the accelerator, the trajectory of the car completely changes, and you kind of slam forward in the way the car is facing. And again, I've said this 3 times now, but once you get used to it, it becomes second nature, and it just becomes really enjoyable, especially for me as someone who plays from the internal cockpit view in most driving games. This is no different. It's just edge of your seat stuff. It's just fantastic. Is that can I say that enough? How good this game feels to play.
I agree. I think the handling. I think we've talked about Sega Rally, and we mentioned the fact that Sega Rally was had never been beaten, had never been truly beaten in handling. I think RalliSport Challenge 2 to me is probably the only game which possibly can say it has.
Oh yeah.
I think some of the tracks. So the ice racing, which we both said is our favourite. I think the ice racing is a great example. So I was playing it this week, and I hadn't played the game for quite a while, and I was playing the ice racing. And the first lap, I literally crashed every single corner. I don't know how I actually managed to get around the track. I couldn't really work out why. I don't know why. I think I was sort of half concentrating on the game. I replayed it, and I sort of concentrated, and it just was perfect. And I feel like the game, it rewards concentration. It rewards people just learning handling.
Yeah.
I know every rally game is the same. Every rally game, you have to learn how to get the most out of handling. But in this game, it feels like the more you learn, the more you practice, the better you get. And there's no rubber banding. It's not a sort of case where it gets easier if you fail. It's just literally even if you feel like you're out of control, if you learn the techniques in the game, you will always have a way out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a sign of a great game. Great genres. Some of the greatest gaming genres have that sort of thing with shoot 'em ups, for instance, where it looks like you're out of control, but actually once you get down to it, there's always a way out of it. And if there's a mistake, if you crash in this game, it is your fault. It's not the fault of the game. And that's a sign of a great rally game, I think.
Yeah, totally. And I think as well as that, the way that the controls are so intuitive, I love the. I think this is also down to in part the design of the actual Xbox controller, the original Xbox controller, because you've got those like really kind of the triggers are obviously they're fully analog, but they have a little bit more resistance than say the Dreamcast. Where the Dreamcast analog triggers are like you can literally just like push them in and there's no resistance at all. on the Xbox pad, because they've got more resistance, you can weight the acceleration and the braking with more degrees of accuracy. And also the absolutely brilliant implementation of the rumble feature is just perfect. Like, I mean, obviously it changes as you go over different terrains, but the way that it just gives a little bump when you change gear, that kind of thing, you can really feel the power and the differential change, as you go over different types of surface. It's really, really well done. If you've never played this game, listener, I'm talking to you now, and you experience it for the first time, you will be amazed that a game from this time was so sensitive in its rumble feature, but also so kind of intuitive with its analog acceleration and braking. It's really something. It's really something quite special
at the time as well, because Colin McRae games were the multi-platform game, so everyone played Colin McRae. And I think Colin McRae was always classed as the sort of the standard of rallying, and I think a lot of people didn't play this because it was on the Xbox. And, although we both have Xboxes and lots and lots of people do have Xboxes, it still wasn't the most popular console, and lots of people didn't have it. And I think a lot of people missed out on this game. And I think even though I love the Colin McRae games, and I love the games that came after, the Dirt series, I think this game trounces the Colin McRae games in terms of pure handling.
I would agree.
It's quite remarkable. And also I think we are talking about the Xbox controller S. We're not talking about the Duke.
Oh, the Duke, yeah.
Don't play it on the Duke. I mean, I don't think it's going to be quite as smooth on that. I might be wrong, but that controller is a hateful object for me. But the controllers. It's a lovely controller anyway. The Xbox S controller is one of the most comfortable controllers I think I've ever held. It's the right size, the right weight, the right everything. But you said about the rumble feature. I was playing on a track yesterday. I think it was in Argentina, which is a very rocky track anyway, and you really do feel it's not overpowering. A lot of games, even now, if they put a rumble feature in, it'll overpower you, and it's just sort of like it'll just shake the controller as heavy as possible. This is, to me, I think it's the best rumble feature to any game until the Xbox One came around. With the Xbox One, obviously, the controllers on the Xbox One have a sort of I'm not sure what the technical term is, but you feel in different parts of the controller, different parts of the rumble. So when I was playing Forza Horizon, for instance, it really feels really authentic when you play the game, and this to me is probably the greatest use of a rumble feature until the Xbox One. I actually forgot how good it was until I played it. I think you messaged me actually, Tom, and said how good is the rumble feature.
Yeah.
And it was the first thing I noticed when I played it as well. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, superb.
Square right, onto snow, over crest, over bridge, into long, easy right. Right, hard left, easy left, into easy right.
Okay, Mike, let's move on to discuss the visuals and the sound in this game. I know we've touched on it already. We've talked about how good this game looks. That's because it looks great even now. Back in 2004, this was the pinnacle of console rally games in terms of visuals. As you said, Mike, the cars look great. There's some fantastic, well-detailed damage effects with bumpers and fenders crumpling, windows breaking, lights being damaged. The cars are super deformable. The damage model is quite forgiving, though. It's not as strict as something like Colin McRae 2005, where even something like a heavy landing will see the windows blow out, which is weird because I saw that yesterday for the first time in a long time, going over a jump in Colin McRae 2005, and bang, my back windscreen went. I was like, Jesus Christ. Yeah. But on that topic, though, on the topic of destructible things, the slight negative for me is that some of the trackside objects are non-destructible, and it's almost like a lottery what is destructible and what isn't, because sometimes you can just hit a little kind of barrier and your car just bounces off it, or sometimes you go through things that you think you're going to bounce off, and it's like there's no real consistency. So that's one minor thing with the. I don't suppose you count that as the visuals, but that's something that I noticed within the game world.
The physics. I think the physics are. We've talked about physics being really, really good, but there are a couple of things where it doesn't quite feel as with roadside objects, and there's certain bits which just feel a little bit work could have been done on them.
Overall, the game looks really nice. It does a lot of things that maybe younger gamers who have never experienced this generation of consoles probably wouldn't expect to see in these kinds of games. So you've got things like, shafts of light coming through trees, you've got reflective puddles, you've got massive draw distances. It just looks really, really cool. I mean, even things like in the internal cockpit views, you've got the windscreen wipers going, you've got the water beading. I mean, it's not as good as something as good as something like Drive Club or one of the Forza Motorsport games on the Xbox One, but for a console, that's nearly 20 years old, you're looking at a really, really damn good-looking game.
The lighting effects are amazing. I think the way the sun shines through the trees, the way that the light sort of reflects off the bonnet of the car, really, really impressive. And I think it looks like a 360 game.
Yeah.
I'm really disappointed they never brought out an HD version of this game, because I think it would have been an amazing game to have on the 360 when you had some amazing games anyway, some amazing rally games, but I think this would have been possibly the top of the pile. Even on the next generation, I mean, it's that good a game where if it was a remaster, it would still be the best game. And I think that says quite a lot.
Yeah. And in terms of like visual effects, again, you've got things like the headlight effects are fantastic because they don't. Basically, you see what's in the light cone. You can't see anything else because it's pitch black because you're in the middle of the countryside. But you also get like sort of weird. I say weird, like nice reflective effects on like signs and things like that, which you don't really get in a lot of games from this time period.
No.
And I remember the first time I played Dirt Rally on the PS4. What struck me about the lighting headlight effects in that is if you do mess up and break your headlights, then you can't see anything. You might as well just retire the stage. It's the same in this game. It's so dark. Obviously this game doesn't have things like high dynamic range, but it's near as damn it almost a sort of an analog of that effect. The world is so dark during the nighttime stages that you rely heavily on your headlights. If you break your headlights, just retire the stage because you can't see anything. Do you know what I mean? I
think that's the one negative for me in the game graphics. I think would be the actual how dark it is in some rallies, even daytime ones. I think some of the rallies are a little bit too dark. I think maybe that's why I didn't include Finland. Maybe all that tree cover would have made it impossible to play. But I think it is a little bit dark in some stages, which is a bit of a shame. And I think there is. You said about the darkness, the night stages. It reminded me. Playing night stage in this game reminded me of playing the latest V-Rally game on the Northern consoles.
Oh yeah.
Because one of the early stages, I think it was V-Rally, it might be WRC. I correct me if I'm wrong, so I know we've played it. But one of the early stages is sort of a test at night time in a real heavy rainstorm, and for some reason it reminded me of that. Because they try to do the same thing where they try to sort of make it very, very, or you must make sure you protect your lights, must make sure that any sort of it's dark, completely dark if you go through. This game did it much better though. This game remembers it's still a game, so even though it is trying to be realistic, it never loses sight of it being an actual game.
Yeah.
Too many rally games decide that they're going to just throw all this stuff at you, make it impossible to drive in the wood of being fun. It never is fun if it does that. This game never goes into that territory of being too, sim-like. It always remains arcade qualities in terms of the fact it's fun, but still having that serious sort of side to it as well.
Easy right. Long, medium left. Medium right. Easy right. Medium left. Caution, bump. Medium right. Easy right.
Mike, we've waxed lyrical about all the positives in this game so far. I'm going to touch on something that I wasn't very keen on now, and that is the music. So we're going to talk a little bit about music and sound effects now. The music I find to be quite intrusive. It doesn't really suit the game, and I just turn the music off, basically. I know you can, with the original Xbox, you can put your own soundtrack on there if you want to. I don't actually have any music on my Xbox. It's there's no soundtracks on there, so I just turn it off. Anyway, I like to play rally games with no music because it gives it a more realistic feel for me.
Agreed.
You touched on the fact that this is very much an arcade experience, and I 100% agree with that. Although it's also one that I can actually play without listening to the code driver. I can just look at the arrows that pop up on the screen.
Yeah.
There's not many rally games I can do that with. I'll be honest, a lot of the time I play games, I know this is going to sound like sacrilege, but I don't generally play games with the music on or the sound on. I'll put like a YouTube video on or a podcast or some music and just play and listen to that. But with rally games, especially like the more modern ones, like the Dirt 2s and the WRC 8s of the world, I have to have the sound on because I have to listen to what the co-driver's saying. Here, it's not imperative that you have that on, and I like that. It's more relaxed. And that's not to say that the co-driver pace notes aren't good. There are two different modes. You've got advanced and simple. Simple is just like easy left, easy right, and then advanced you've got 3 left, 100, that kind of stuff. So you kind of have you've got the two different flavors of pace notes depending on what you're familiar with. So that's nice. And generally car effects are quite good. There are lots of meaty engine sounds. I do like the way that when you go through like a little narrow street, it kind of echoes around, so you get this like sort of really kind of you can hear the power of the engines, and then when you blast through the little streets, you're back out in the open countryside, and the noise kind of dies down again. I thought that was a really nice touch. But yeah, overall it's average for music, but pretty good on engine sounds.
I think the music. I think we have to make a public announcement at this point. If you play a rally game with music, you're playing it wrong. I think that's. That's not being mean. I mean, anyone who plays a rally game with music on, you lose quite a bit from the game. I think at that point, I'm not entirely sure because I think I turned it off straight away. But I think the music plays throughout the course of every race. Is that right?
Yeah, you're right.
RalliSport Challenge 2?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I mean, I hate that. That's a real bad design decision because it's like I don't see why you would want to. I understand in a pure arcade game, I understand that, but it feels a little bit off for me, and I think that's the issue. I think another issue with me with sound, the one thing with me for sound, well, not an issue, it's a positive actually. The sound sounds quite authentic. It sounds like you actually are racing. Very similar in that effect to Dirt on the Xbox 360, where it does sound like a real. There's lots of sound effects, and it feels like they haven't sort of just put one sound effect for every single time your car hits something.
Yeah, lots of like little incidental sound effects as well, like sort of crowds and air horns as you go past the grandstand on the rallycross stages. Just little things like that. They're really, really nice touches. Yeah, sounds all right apart from the music.
Hairpin right, long, easy left, opens. Long, easy right, over crest, tightens. Easy right, over crest, easy left, long, easy right, into medium left.
Let's look at a review, a contemporary review of RalliSport Challenge 2 for the Xbox. I've got one here from Eurogamer, which I dredged up from the depths of the internet. So here's what Eurogamer said about RalliSport Challenge 2. One of the most beautiful and enjoyable rally games ever made meets one of the most intuitive and celebrated online services ever made. They get on. And the final sort of closing paragraph says of RalliSport Challenge 2, there's no denying that RalliSport Challenge 2 is a benchmark product in virtually every area, perhaps just lacking in one or two areas that some may take minor exception to. But honestly, if you come away unimpressed from playing RalliSport Challenge 2, we'd advise you to seek medical attention. Because in 25 years of playing driving games, no other title comes close to its startlingly lifelike environments, its impressively realistic yet fun handling system, nor the overwhelming sense of fun that permeates the single player and most of all the multiplayer. Just buy it, it's as simple as that. And then they give a score of 9 out of 10. Pretty much correlates with what we've just said for the last 35 minutes, I think, Mike. I would like to give my score, but actually I'm going to be polite and I'm going to let you give your score first out of 10 for RalliSport Challenge 2. I
think I actually agree with Eurogamer quite heavily on this one. I think 9 out of 10 fits for me. I think it's damn near perfect. I think for me, I think the only reason I wouldn't give it a 10, and it would be a 10 if it wasn't for the fact that to get it running and looking as good as it should do, you have to sort of jump through some hoops in terms of the fact it's not going to run quite as great on a large screen TV now as it would have done. So for me, a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, a 9 out of 10 from me as well. It's everything you want from a rally game. It's fun, it's fast, there's lots of variety, plays amazingly well, and still holds up to this day. The only reason I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10, and it's probably not its fault, is that there isn't a RalliSport Challenge 3. If only we got a RalliSport Challenge 3.
You never know, Series X might deliver a RalliSport Challenge 3.
I also said this to you on text, Mike. If
RalliSport
RalliSport Challenge 3 was announced as an Xbox Series X game, that would be my console of choice in the next generation. I would buy an Xbox Series X for that game. Let's see if it happens.
Just very, very briefly, I think I don't think RalliSport Challenge 2 is playable on either Xbox 360 or Xbox One. Am I correct in saying that?
I don't think it's on the compatibility list, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just have a quick look.
I believe it's due to licensing. I believe licensing issues was the reason, if I remember rightly. There was a bit of a conversation about it back in the day. I remember a lot of the Xbox magazines talked about it and how they wanted the game to come back. And I think then the newer ones came out, so the Dirt games come out, and I think sort of superseded to an extent what RalliSport Challenge 2 had done. And then I think that was sort of forgotten about. I also want to put in very quickly, whilst Tom's doing some research very quickly, the game does, to me, it fits into the series of sort of the race driver games, the sort of Codemasters, Toka Touring Car, Race Driver, up to Colin McRae's as well. That sort of series of games where the fun takes precedent over the realism. I think this game fits into that perfectly.
I think that just about does it for this particular episode. We have waxed lyrical long enough about RalliSport Challenge 2. Basically, the consensus is, if you've never played RalliSport Challenge 2, do whatever you can to play it. You need the original Xbox, you need a copy of the game, just go and play it, because it's brilliant.
It's worth it. It's worth it. To buy an original Xbox and buy this game, it's going to cost you, £44 to buy both of them together at the current time in the UK? It is worth it. It's worth as much as a modern day game.
Brilliant. Okay, Mike, thank you as ever for joining me, buckling up and sitting through this rather nice and interesting journey down memory lane, SS Memory Lane. You can find us on Twitter at PowerDriftPod. You can also find all of our episodes at powerdriftingpodcast.com, and you can also find us on iTunes and Spotify. Until next time, I've been Tom, that's been Mike, and we will see you on the next episode of Power Drifting. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That wasn't too bad.
Cool.
Right, put some more music here. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's music.
Yes. I get the gist. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to crack on now with some gameplay and handling.